Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
Hey, I've been in construction since 1983 and a building contractor for 30 years, and I gotta tell you, a wall like this would have cost thousands of dollars.
But we got this wood for free.
That's right, we're gonna show you how to build it every single step next on Now We Build.
The magic behind getting this free wood is pallets. You know, it's that common shipping material. You see it everywhere.
Yeah, you see a lot of these projects on YouTube, but usually they're very minimal work, so they're either pallet beds or they're pallet fences. Here we're gonna have to put in a lot of work. We're gonna show you how to do that next, so let's get to it. All right, let's go get a pallet. We have your pick. So what to be looking for in pallets, if you have your choice to go pick them up, is that these are very thin. You want to be looking at your wood types. If you can find any that are oak, that's awesome. But as you can see, like something like this is so beat up, you're only going to get a few pieces out of it. Then you have ones like this. Thin pieces, but it's solid wood, so you're going to get a lot of wood out of it. And then of course there's crappy ones made out of plywood, stay away from those. But this is kind of like your typical one. And this is the back of it. So let's start with this one. The front of it actually looks pretty good. With my method that I'm going to show you, you can actually get right up to the nails. So we're going to get a lot of wood out of this one. Let's go try it. So the tool we're going to be using is a $99 tool on Amazon from Milescraft. This is an amazing tool. I heard about it from Snumpy Nubs, and he's right. It's a really cool tool. I've had other versions of it, like I have this version. I've used this for years, and it's a great tool. It's held up really well, made of aluminum as well, but it's solid. So when you go to pack it up, this is it. You have to find space for it. This one actually comes apart with just a few quick adjustments, and you can take it apart. You can also extend it, make it bigger. So the problem is when you go to put it on a piece, usually you have to do it with two people, and you got to clamp it on. So now I'm over here, I can't clamp it on, and it starts to move as you clamp it, and then there's an offset, and so you're gonna have to have either a block of wood or a tape measure to get your offset. With the Milescraft one, this red strip is sacrificial. You set it up for your saw, and so wherever you put that line, that is the line. So setting it up for this, what I do is I lay it down and I adjust it to be just off the nails. So I'm gonna get to keep everything to the red. And then with that $99, you don't just get this, you get this, which you can mount just about any saw to, except for worm drive saws. It's totally adjustable to your saw. Only took me about 6 minutes to mount it. And then if I want to take the saw off and use it for other things, it only takes about a minute to take it off. And when I put it back on, it's still set up properly, which is huge because who wants to go through the trouble of resetting it up? So then this is going to fit onto my track. And you might be saying, well, Zach, wait a minute, you didn't clamp this down, so it's just going to move. I thought the same thing. The first few cuts, I clamped it down. And then I thought, well, Stumpy Nub says you don't have to. And the reason you don't have to is on the back of it is this non-slip stuff, and it actually works. So after we put it down to our thing, and again, that just took me a second. All right, here we go with the cut. And as you can see, it hasn't moved. In fact, the whole pallet just moved, but it didn't move. And now instead of having to unclamp it, I just take it off. And as you can see, we got to cut right up to the nails. All right, so now my second pass, same thing I'm gonna do over here. I'm gonna cover the nails this time, so don't see any nails. And maybe I'll just cheat it like 1/8 of an inch. All right, so now I'm done with the setup. Slip that in the track, make sure nothing's moved. Now check this out. Yeah, you have the idea. These are just gonna lift out of place. What I used to do is attack this with a hammer and a crowbar and all sorts of stuff, and I would just tire myself out, and still you lose this piece anyway because it's gonna be, with the nails. This way you get like a good 17 inches or so of pretty decent wood. So then what I recommend doing is taking all the same size stuff and stacking it together in some kind of pile. So over here I've got piles from different ones, and that way later when you're going through and trying to figure out what to do with each thickness, they're all kind of together, if you can see that. And I'm using these furniture rollers from Harbor Freight. They're about, what, 15 bucks I think? Sometimes you get them on sale for like 10 or 12. Pick up a bunch because they're really useful, because now if I need to move this out of the way, I just roll the whole thing. So as you can see, we're gonna do the same thing here. We'll get this bunch out. We're gonna flip it over, get those out, and then we're gonna be left, in this case, with 3 2x4s. Those we'll chop up, bring over to the burn pile, and get rid of. So our wall is 20 feet long by 4 feet high, and we used about 10 pallets.
We got our pallets as part of the delivery of large items, but you can find free pallets just about anywhere that there are large commercial companies.
Yeah, just keep an eye out for those free pallet signs. So you're gonna have a lot of scrap when you do your pallets, so make sure that you keep that in mind and kind of do it while you're cutting your pallets apart, or otherwise you'll have a pile that's like unbelievable. So I'm trying to keep up with it. It's about, in this kind of fire situation, it's like 2 pallets a night. So now we're jointing all the pieces. We want one straight edge to then run against the table saw fence.
This is so that each piece has nice parallel edges.
Now you can get a cheap jointer at Harbor Freight or even on Amazon. You don't need anything big or fancy for this project because the pieces are so short. So I'm jointing with my dad here, and you can do this alone, but it's so much faster to have a receiver to stack them as you go. You may notice that I'm moving the fence as we joint, and that's to even our wear on the jointer blade. If you run them all on the same part of the blade, then you'll get a weird wear pattern.
Make sure to stack all your pieces with the jointed edge on the same side to make the next step easier. Here's where furniture dollies come in handy.
All right, we're sending the wood up for storage up to the attic. Yes, that's an elevator, folks. And yes, we will show you how we made it on another video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss it.
This elevator is a game changer for our shop.
So after jointing, the next step is ripping to width and then planing those pieces.
In terms of width, we had 2 different sizes, thin and wide.
So in our case, our pallet boards came to us in about 3.5 inch and 5.5 inch widths, and then we ripped them down to 3.25 and 5.25. Then we planed all the boards. So the boards started out at about 3/4 of an inch, and so we planed off a 1/16 of an inch on each side of the board to start.
Why did we do that?
Well, because that way we get to see what the boards look like on both sides, and we get to pick the best side. And it means that the other side, the back, will have a nice gluing area to attach to the wall. Then we planed a few more passes to get it down to 3/8 of an inch. That's what we used in this case.
We tore off the sheetrock, and here's what we found underneath.
You can see where all the critters were living because they chewed it all up. So it became way less effective as insulation. And they usually travel through these holes where you have the wiring, and they run along the wires to get to their next bay. And yeah, down the bottom you can definitely see all the mouse poo. Gross. That's in all of your walls, America. Yeah, I mean, they love living in this stuff. It's so comfy for them, but it's only comfy when they kind of chew it up and make it into a nest. So a lot of the volume trickles down to the bottom, and then you've got just tons of acorns and poop. So we decided to clean this all out, and that way we can do all of our wiring with all this open, and we can also kind of figure out where they got in and maybe spray some foam in there and keep them from getting back in so easily. All right, check this out, Tessie.
What? Where's the insulation?
All that insulation was here.
What
And
the-
now that was all empty because
Oh my
basically
God.
mice or probably squirrels live down here.
So we just discovered a squirrel house.
Yeah, this is basically a
It
squirrel.
looks like the same thing on that one too, probably. No, they definitely have holes in it.
Yeah, you can see where they lived.
Whoa,
That's a nest right there.
crazy.
Yep. It's in all your walls.
As you can see, because this garage was built during the Depression in 1934, framing is 24 inches on center because they were trying to save all the wood they could, and sometimes it's not consistent. What Jesse's doing now is sistering a couple studs onto the existing studs that don't have a full edge.
That's what I'm loving. It's either too tight or too loose.
That's not wood. What are you cutting there?
That's bubble insulation. If you look behind you, we just cut those to the right width. This is actually kind of a hack I just learned about. Buy a 48-inch wide roll of this stuff, and then if you got odd spacings, you can just cut it to that spacing. And then watch what we're gonna do next. It's the right width.
Ah, to where?
So if you look over here, you got all these just odd spacings. This one's gonna fit really well, either here,
Oh, nice.
or one bit over here.
Nice.
So you might be saying, okay, that's just 2 bays, and then you have all these other weird ones. Well, after we do those 2 bays, we're gonna cut it down again to whatever fits the next couple bays. Hey, what staple gun are you using?
I think this is just a cheapo, the cheapest one we could get at Home Depot, or it's electric. Yeah, and so you just charge it up, with a barrel connector. It saved us, probably saved my hands.
All right, pretty simple. And drag it under our wiring. We whacked in all the nails so it makes it easier, because you can see how where you don't do that, they poke through.
Oh, I see.
And this gives us R6 just alone. And then if we put another layer, which we're planning on doing before we close this up, it'll give us R12.
Interesting. So why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing your typical pink insulation?
Because we've got so many different bays here of different widths, so we would have to make it up, and it would probably take a whole day of just insulation. And this is about the same price, if not cheaper. And it gives us R12, which we would have only achieved R11 anyway.
Interesting.
All right, so we finished with the first layer of bubble foil. Now we're gonna do a little more electrical.
We're planning on having some new outlets in this wall because, like any good shop, you need plenty of accessible power.
We're running 12-2 Romex for a 20 amp circuit, pretty much just gonna be for this wall. Got our first piece of plywood in. That's an entire sheet. Now it's gonna get a little trickier because the cuts begin. Now, you don't need to do this next step if you have a decent sheetrock wall in your shop. We're using 1/2-inch CDX plywood so that we can attach our herringbone wood pattern and also have a ton of strength to attach other future shop-related things without having to worry about studs. We're getting there. And the final piece goes in.
Next, we experimented with different patterns. This is what we ended up liking the most for the shop, a herringbone pattern.
So we did a little test for you the other night so that you wouldn't have to wait 24 hours. We glued a couple test pieces of the wood that we're going to be using on that wall, and we used mastic. There's a problem though, Jess.
Yeah, so when we put the boards on, they weren't this bent and they were stuck flat. I made sure to stick them flat, but as you can see, they're not flat anymore. So what happened?
Yeah, I think what happened is it's a water-based mastic, and so you've got this whole back. It's like you poured water on it, and so then it cups. But at the same time, it's pulling away from what you just stuck it to because there's no real strength there until later in the setup.
Right.
So this cupping happened starting at about an hour in, and now it's so cupped it pulled itself off so bad that you're actually able to pull most of it off. If not all, so go ahead and just pull it off. Yeah, so you can see, we did have
stick here, right?
and,
Pulled
and we had, you did cover it well.
Yeah.
But so what we're going to do instead, and the reason we tested this, we thought it might happen.
Yeah.
We didn't want to put it all, do the whole wall. Mastic is generally good for tile, and tile is not absorbent, so you don't get any of that kind of cupping.
Well, it doesn't swell. It may absorb
swell.
the water, and that may help with the actual bonding of the
But like,
glue.
I know you can't see it on the camera, maybe you can if I do it close, but see how cupped that is? And so that's bad. So what we decided to do,
Use the right product.
use the right product. And I've been using this for years and I should have thought of it. It's a polyurethane based panel adhesive, and the reason why it works is because it's not water based. So the wood just kind of is agnostic to it. It's like, whatever. And you're not covering the entire back of it usually, you just do a couple like, whoop,
Right.
and it has immediate tack. So what that means is you don't have to worry about it slipping for an hour while it's building up its tack. It's pretty much not gonna move. I think we still will use a couple brads here and there where they won't be seen. We've had really good luck with this out in the solar trailer, down in our other studio, the Now We Review channel studio.
And that was with thinner boards.
Exactly.
And they
So-
didn't cup either.
And I've been using it for years, putting on thin wainscoting and stuff like that. So I think we're gonna be safe with this. It's just that, you know, we bought a whole tub of the wrong stuff. But rather do the test and learn than put up the whole wall.
Right. And this is why it's called panel adhesive, because it's for adhering panels. And panels, if you normally would get them wet, they would warp just like our 2 test pieces did.
So our next step is we're gonna be putting up, I think, some 2x4 on our line. We'll just screw that temporarily and that'll give us a nice base to go to. Then Jesse's gonna probably be applying and I'm gonna be cutting, so you can watch, we'll do like a time lapse or something so you can see this wall come together. So Jesse is applying panel adhesive and using the brad gun with 1-inch brads to install the pieces following our herringbone pattern, while I am the cut man.
This 2x4 is where our horizontal shelf will go, which is not only a useful feature, as you'll see in a minute, but also helps visually break up the wall for aesthetics.
It's a slow process to start, but as you get going, it does speed up. Now this is a super important step because every board you install is there forever, so take your time, choose your boards wisely.
We tried to use our best looking boards in places that were front and center, and if there are ugly spots on your boards, you can often cut them off for smaller pieces.
Save all your pieces though, because there are so many small areas near the edges that you'll want those for.
Cut all your pieces slightly longer, and then take the time to shorten them to fit snugly. We didn't always do this, thinking that the math would prevail.
Right, in the real world, not everything is square and flat, so we had some gaps, but this is a shop wall and not a dining room wall.
All right, so we've got our proprietary mix of equal parts tung oil, paint thinner, and urethane, and now it's not proprietary anymore. And we're going to apply to this wall. It's hopefully going to bring out some of the wood grain and a little protection, I guess. Mainly just for looks. But here's the before, and here's what it looks like when we apply. So you can see it just kind of brings out the grain a little bit more, especially on this oak that looks very nice. Oh, that is satisfying. And it dries quick too. Yeah, in our test we got like less than an hour drying time, so.
Okay, this literally took us, what, 10 minutes?
Yeah, that was.
I don't know why I thought this was going to take us a whole lot longer. This looks amazing.
You know why it would have taken us longer? If it weren't on the wall. If we had to do each piece and then lay it out. Doing it on the wall was a good move, in my opinion, because it was so fast.
But look how it just brings out the colors of the wood so much better. I mean, there's so many beautiful pieces of wood here. You know, if you look at this piece of pine, for instance, that's right here, it looked so blah before, and now with a little bit more yellow, it looks great. And then all the oak just pops.
I know. It looks as good as like wood flooring or.
What's amazing to me is that there's pieces of like
maple that, like, that's, you know, expensive wood. The oak is expensive.
Yeah.
And yet because there's parts of it that weren't perfect and then you can cut around,
Yeah.
you get so much just beauty.
This is all free.
Yeah.
All this wood was free. I mean, the labor was not free, but no, really, it really turned out nice. And yeah, applying this finish, it's like turning up the saturation and contrast on a picture, except in real life, and it brings out all the beautiful brush strokes of the wood.
It also helps hide a lot of the gaps because, as you were pointing out, the grain's brought out more, and so your eye is more drawn to the wood and less to the gaps.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that contrast, the darker colors hides a lot of the gaps because you're busy looking at the grain, and the grain is moving in the same direction as most of the gaps anyway.
And I guess we never really talked about the pattern. So we got two different widths of wood, a 5 1/4 and a 3 1/4. And so we did 2 3s and a 5, just repeated herringbone style over and over.
Yeah.
It leads to a little bit of an irregularity in the shape, but I think that it helps break up the pattern a bit. If it's too repeaty, then I think you'd start to notice any problems. But because you have these two blocks that just kind of break up the whole thing, it just kind of draws your eye away from the pattern, and it more looks at all the wood.
Now, what's the formula for the length again?
So it has to be at least 2 times the width. So each length has to be at least twice the width.
So you take the 5 1/4 plus the 3 1/4. So that's rough. We're just doing rough here. 8 1/2. You double it. That's 17 inches. And that's what we got here. Now you can 3 times it, 4 times it, whatever you want. You can even 1 times it.
Yes.
If you want, but it has to be a multiple. And so that's the problem with pallets, is that this is pretty much the perfect number, which is around 16, 17 inches.
Right. And I mean, you don't have to necessarily do this width. It saved us time, because obviously on a pallet you have like 2 wide strips usually down the outsides, the front and the back. And then you have the narrower strips along the middle. And so we took advantage of having the wider pieces. If we had to go smaller, that would have meant basically, I don't know, at least another row or 2 up at the top, which means more pieces, which means more planing and stuff like that. Or you'd have to throw away all these nice big chunks.
Now we've already put in the 2x4, which is going to support this little shelf. This is just a piece of scrap that we're trying the shelf out with. But we're basically going to have some kind of shelf here. This will be covered. And then we're also going to have a piece down the bottom. And then what's our pattern going to be down the bottom?
I think it's just going to be vertical. I don't know if we necessarily need to stick with a pattern, but let me show you what it'll look like. We'll have some kind of piece of trim. It's not going to be this jumped piece of wood, but then we're going to have vertical slats. I think that's going to be pretty nice. So we'll have this shelf. This shelf, by the way, is going to meet up with our workbenches, and so
Oh, so it's going to be the right height to match that. That's cool.
the right height and also the right width. So that way it takes up this gap, which is part of the foundation of the shop. We can't really change this stupid thing. So it'll leave a little bit of air gap behind, each workbench, but that'll allow us to hide all the electrical behind the workbenches, which will hopefully look really nice.
All right, on to the next step.
Okay, so now we're installing the horizontal shelf that's going across the entire wall. And there's 3 generations working together.
The 2x4 horizontal supports across the wall, and then small vertical blocking is above the shelf. We decided to spend a bit of money and use solid oak for the shelf and trim. I think it's going to look really nice.
You can imagine how expensive this would be if we had to build the whole wall out of solid oak. So it's nice getting free oak in the pallets.
And you'll see why the upper oak trim is so wide in a minute.
Now we're cutting in outlet boxes and wiring them up.
And we're also installing the vertical wood pieces. The reason that we don't have to be so precise at the top or bottom is that it's going to be covered by horizontal trim pieces.
Nice to have a rolling seat here that you can get at Harbor Freight. It saves your knees and your back and is well worth the price, believe me. Your future self will thank you. Now Jesse is applying finish to the newly installed oak trim and vertical pieces.
Look how it pulls the grain out of that oak.
Again, this finish we're using is 1 part spar varnish or semi-gloss polyurethane, either one will do, 1 part paint thinner, and 1 part tung oil. You can keep it in a closed glass container for quite a while.
And you don't need anything fancy to apply it with. Just a clean cotton rag will do, and be sure to wear gloves.
Now we've installed scrap wood as blocking, and we're about to install the bottom pine baseboard. Jesse has given the baseboards a final sanding.
You can see that we're having to scribe the baseboards to the foundation because, again, it was built in 1934 and nothing is level or flat.
Now we're about to install our 4 Harbor Freight outlet strips. They're about like 15 bucks, right? Mm-hmm. So we're drilling the holes through our shelves for the wiring, and we're gonna hide most of that wiring with our final pine trim piece, as you can see in a minute.
And because our rolling tool carts will almost always be up against the wall, you won't see the outlets either.
All right, you ready to stand back and see your masterpiece here?
I think so.
I already see it. Oh my God, look at it.
That's a workshop. Yeah.
Think we have enough outlets?
48?
52, buddy. 52. You got to count these down here.
Wow.
In case you missed it, we drilled holes for that, and then Jesse rewired them. He had to cut the wire, run it back up in. We used Wagyus, and that way we could wire this all up, put the 48 outlets here. This is all one 20 amp circuit. Obviously, we're not going to plug in 48 things at once. And you can get these at Harbor Freight. Good deals.
Well, there you have it. It's all done. And this project took us a couple weeks because we were working, off and on. How long do you think it would have taken if we had just buckled down and did it all at once?
I think if we just worked straight on it, we could have done it in a week.
So the next thing that I'm sure everybody's wondering is about cost. How much did this cost?
All right, so if we're just talking about the herringbone pattern, then the biggest cost was actually the panel adhesive. That was about 50 bucks. And then there was only brads and the finish that you put on, which is another like 20 bucks. So 70 bucks for this.
But I mean, obviously we did a bunch more steps than just the herringbone. So, what would you estimate for everything else?
Well, that's tougher because everyone's gonna have a different situation. If you have nice sheetrock walls in your shop, then you don't need to do all that stuff we did behind there. And so your project isn't gonna cost much more than this.
Right, I mean, we were showing you the insulation and
wiring,
and we put on, plywood and all that stuff, and that obviously was expensive, but yeah, I mean, if you already have a decent wall, which we didn't have, then you're gonna be fine just applying it straight to sheetrock.
Yeah, the only expensive part would be if you're gonna do some nice trim features like we did here. That's gonna be whatever wood you choose, like oak or pine, multiplied by how many feet. So that could be the priciest part of the project.
And again, the reason that we did so much trim and, we put in a little shelf was so that way we could have a spot to, attach our outlets, and so we could have something where we could roll our workbenches up to, which is going to look really nice. It's going to keep stuff from falling behind our workbenches. It's a very custom thing. Your project might be a little different.
Honestly, the most stressful part of this project for me was when we were in the pallet phase and we were getting the pallets prepped because it was a few days of work. And as I saw those pieces of crappy wood sitting there, I was like, is this just a bad idea? Is this whole thing going to look like crap?
Yeah, and I mean, now looking at it, I'm pretty impressed with how it came out, especially knowing that this was free.
Exactly. I don't know if I would have done this in my dining room or my living room, but for a shop, this is perfect.
And you have to keep in mind, pallets come in all shapes and sizes. So you might live in a place where there's hardwood pallets galore, and you could be really picky, and you could I'm only doing oak. There's some places where they make walnut pallets.
I know.
And so you rip one of those apart, and you're gonna have this beautiful wood. We kind of had to mix and match with our woods here. There's some pine, there's some oak, I think there's a little bit of ash. So it's kind of a mishmash. I think, though, that there is a lot of variability in what you could be able to accomplish.
But let us know down below what you guys think, and also let us know about projects that you'd like us to cover, because we got a lot of cool stuff coming up. We're going to show you how to build that elevator that we built, because that would come in handy in a lot of shops. And we've also got a bunch of solar and battery projects that you're really not going to want to miss. So make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, I mean, tools have never been so affordable, which means that the average person can learn a ton of new skills that can really come into play when you're doing lots of different types of projects. And we want to show you a ton of them here on Now We Build.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you guys next time on Now We Build.